Hi everyone, welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert 𝐿𝐶 is your usual suspect once again. Welcome back from all that midweek action in the Spanish La Liga, in the Carabao Cup, in the UEFA Europa League, and all elsewhere that you may have enjoyed some football on your screens. Anyways, we are back here yet again for another preview as we enter match day 6 of the Premier League. So join me for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so as we dive into some of the fixtures that will be coming your way this weekend. Before we dissect some of those, here is the run of fixtures that will be coming your way this weekend. Things will kick off when Manchester City, the reigning champions, make a trip to Newcastle, St. James's Park in the early kickoff. That's at 2:30 p.m. And then, of course, we'll have fixtures at 5 p.m. that will involve Arsenal at home against Leicester City, while Brentford will host West Ham. Chelsea will be at the Stamford Bridge to host Brighton and Hove Albion, while Everton, who are still searching for their first victory of the season, will be up against Crystal Palace, who are equally searching for their first win of the season, despite recording 3 draws already to their name. And then Nottingham Forest will be at home against Fulham. All those fixtures coming your way at 5 p.m. East African time, and at 7:30 p.m. we'll have Wolverhampton Wanderers host Liverpool at Molineux Stadium there. And on Super Sunday, action will kick off at 4 p.m. when Ipswich Town play home against Aston Villa, while Manchester United will come later on at 6:30 p.m. when they entertain Tottenham Hotspurs at Old Trafford. And on Monday Night Football, we'll have Bournemouth up against Southampton. Southampton there yet to record a win this season. Anyway, some of the fixtures that we'll be looking at will include that of Manchester City, one of Arsenal, maybe Chelsea, and more importantly that of Manchester United. So let's kick things off at St. James's Park, where Newcastle will be up against the reigning champions, who will be without the services of their Spanish midfielder in Rodri. Now, whereas it will be a major miss for Manchester City and a big concern for Pep Guardiola, although they are yet to ascertain the full extent of his injury. The initial reports have speculated that it could be an anterior cruciate ligament injury that could see him out for a huge chunk of the season, if not for the rest of the season. But Pep Guardiola will be hoping that it doesn't have to come to that, given that he is a very pivotal player for this Manchester City side, both in the Premier League and in the UEFA Champions League, among any other competitions that they may find their names in. Anyways, while he will be a big miss for the champions, I do not think it will bother them that much, especially going into a fixture like that of Newcastle, because prior to their last game, he had not started a single Premier League game. Pep Guardiola had opted to ease him back into the team after giving him an extended rest in the aftermath of the Euro 2024 there, and not to mention that he had sustained some injury in there. So he tried to ease him back in. He did give him some minutes in their goalless draw against Inter Milan before fielding him as a starter in that 2-2 draw against Arsenal in their last fixture. Now it is in that particular fixture that he went off injured, I think around the 21st minute there of the game. So it will be a big miss, of course, but I think Manchester City do have the players to try and fill that void, just like they did in their opening 4 fixtures, all which they went on to win, by the way, including beating up against Chelsea by 2-0, beating up against teams like West Ham, I think by 3-1, beating up against Ipswich Town by 4-1, not to mention beating up against Brentford by 2-1. So, whereas he will be a big miss, surely Manchester City do have the capability, do have the resources to contend with his absence, and they will be looking to players like Mateo Kovacic to cover that void. And then, of course, they do have a Matthias Nunes in there, Bernardo Silva, Ilkay Gundogan. All that midfield composition is one that is capable to fill the shoes of an absent Rodri as they come into this fixture at St. James's Park. Of course, they have a well-trusted team on the back line. Kyle Walker, Joshko Gvardiol, Ruben Diaz in there, and then John Stones, who by the way came off the bench to score the equalizer in that 2-2 draw up against Arsenal. So clearly, Manela Kanji. So on paper, minus the absence of Nathan Ake, all their defensive backline is really available. And then Rico Ruiz is one of those players that they also played at right back. So clearly, they do have the players to field up against this Newcastle side. And with the forward lines, Braut Erling Haaland cannot just stop scoring. He has 10 goals already to his name after 5 Premier League games, including 2 hat-tricks, and then a goal against Chelsea, a goal against Arsenal, among others that are in, and of course his burst against Brentford in there. So it is indeed well that they do have the players to contend with this Newcastle side in the absence of Rodri. Of course, the midfield battle, my expectation will be between Mateo Kovacic. I suspect that without Kevin De Bruyne, it will be Bernardo Silva in that mix and Ilkay Gundogan in that play. And then, of course, on the other side of Newcastle, you do expect Sandro Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes, Joelinton, very, very physical guy, one that Manchester City will have to worry about. Very good box-to-box midfielder. He does have the athleticism to keep going back and forth across that pitch, but also is a hard tackler. So the Manchester City will be worried of his physical prowess. So that's where I think the midfield battle will be. And then, of course, defensively, Newcastle will be without Steven Botman, but Fabian Schär will be available to lead that backline. And whoever else Ed Howe may decide to field him alongside, whether it will be Livramento, whether it will be Kieran Trippier in that right back, although there's been some, sour tongue between the manager and his former captain, having stripped him of the captaincy and handed the armband to Bruno Guimaraes since then. But again, Nick Pope in goal has showed he has already made some tremendous saves this season, despite the fact that they did lose their previous fixture by 3-1 when they were playing away at Fulham. Nonetheless, they will be looking forward to bouncing back from that defeat and putting some results on their scoreboard. But be that as of it may, they may have to do it without the availability of Alexander Isak, who is a doubt for this particular fixture. Perhaps late fitness tests could decide otherwise, but he has a foot injury that could keep him out of this fixture. Nonetheless, the likes of Miguel Almiron, Harvey Barnes, these are players that they can look forward to try and lead this Newcastle frontline against Manchester City. Of course, Callum Wilson is also absent through injury, but when you look at players like Jacob Ramsey in that mix, Anthony Gordon there, of course, what we all know as a summer target for Liverpool, very, very potent players that can give Manchester City the headache. Nonetheless, I do not think Manchester City will have so much really to worry about this Newcastle, because if record is anything to go by, then Newcastle do really struggle to beat up against a Manchester City team. In the last 5 meetings between the two sides, Manchester City has beaten Newcastle at least 4 times, the other ending in a draw, including beating them home and away last season by 1-0 at the Etihad Stadium, and I think by 3-2 at St. James's Park. So at St. James's Park, it was a high-scoring game, as we did observe last season. And what is our expectation this season? I'm yet to make up my mind. Like I said, if record is anything to go by, 48 meetings overall between these two sides, 31 victories for Manchester City, 9 draws and 8 wins for Newcastle. So clearly, that's a record that Manchester City that have really dominated over the years. And I expect that regardless of the odds, that while Newcastle will really compete in this particular one, I do not think Manchester City will fail to overcome them. And that's why I'm going for a 2-1 victory for the reigning champions for this particular fixture. Let me know what your prediction is down in the comment section. Quickly allow us to move forward to Arsenal versus Leicester City. This game will be coming on your screens at 5 sharp. That's PM in the East African time. Leicester City, one of the other teams that are still searching for their first victory this season, despite recording, I think 3 draws to their name so far. Their last being a 2-2 draw against Everton there. So Steve Cooper really not unhappy with some of the decisions in that particular game. They did have an encounter in the EFL Cup where they managed to go through on penalties, while Arsenal on the other side, after being battled to a 2-2 draw against Manchester City, went on to beat Bolton Wanderers by 5-1 in the Carabao Cup to advance to the next round, in which they will be playing I think Preston, while Leicester City may have a date with Manchester United. I stand to be corrected on that particular draw. Anyway, should have missed the facts. This particular fixture for Arsenal will of course come a little too early for players like Martin Odegaard, who's still out through injury. Mikel Merino and Takehiro Tomiyasu have returned to light training. That means they are training away from the main squad, but they are back in training, so they will not feature in this one just as much as Zinchenko and Kieran Tierney. David Raya, their number one goalkeeper, is a doubt for this one. Of course, he did miss the Carabao Cup fixture through injury. It is reported that he did sustain a muscular injury. He had the bandage around his knee while walking away from the Etihad Stadium in the aftermath of that game at Manchester City. And then, for those of you that did notice, he had a limp, a slight limp, in their 1-0 victory against Tottenham Hotspurs in the London Derby. So, Mikel Arteta may have to do away without his number one goalkeeper in David Raya. That means he would have to look to the services of the on-loan goalkeeper Neto from Bournemouth there. In the midweek, he couldn't field him because he was captain, having featured for AFC Bournemouth in the same competition, and that's why you had, I think, Jack Potter, the 16-year-old, making his debut, being the youngest player to ever start a game for Arsenal in midweek against Bolton. So, but of course, there were plenty of positives to take away from the Bolton fixture, including Ethan Nwaneri, who scored a brace in that one. Lewis Kelly was very, very brilliant in that particular fixture. I thought Ricardo Carafiori, yes, had a slow start to the game, but was very decent. 𝐿𝐿𝐿, very good in that one. Declan Rice did score. I thought Raheem Sterling, it took him some time to settle into the game, but in the second half, he was quite brilliant, scored one and nearly assisted the other. Of course, Kai Havertz did come on and score, something that boosts his confidence as he scored his third goal of this season in all competitions. So, there were positives for Mikel Arteta to take away from that particular fixture. So, with those injury assumptions in mind, I do think they could field maybe Neto. Of course, Ben White didn't start that game against Manchester City because, again, he's one of those players that has oftentimes played through injury. So that's why Mikel Arteta chose not to field him as a starter in that Manchester City game and had to call him from the bench when they were down to 10 men. Now, of course, Leandro Trossard does return for this one, having served his one-match ban for the red card he suffered against Manchester City by missing that one fixture against Bolton. So that one does count, so he'll be available to be fielded for this particular one. Plenty of Arsenal fans have called for Mikel Arteta to field Ethan Nwaneri in this Leicester fixture, given his performance, brilliant performance against Bolton Wanderers, especially in the absence of Martin Odegaard, considering that the team is struggling to create plenty of chances. So, then Jurriën Timber was the other concern in the aftermath of that Manchester City game. He did limp off. He had to be taken off, I think, around the 92nd minute or somewhere in there. But Mikel Arteta does say he has trained normally with the rest of the team. So my expectation would be that he may not change the starting lineup that started up against Manchester City when it comes to the back line, but the goalkeeper, who is a doubt for this fixture. So that means Saliba, Gabriel Magalhaes, Jurriën Timber, and Ricardo Carafiori could start in that back four. Then the midfield of Thomas Partey, Declan Rice, and if anything is to change, it could be Ethan Nwaneri coming to play in that Odegaard position where, Leandro Trossard did start up against Man City. And then, of course, Bukayo Saka, who started in that fixture against Bolton, having been withdrawn at halftime in the fixture against Man City. And then, of course, Martinelli on the other side and Kai Havertz leading the line. Gabriel Jesus, while he looked good in the fixture against Bolton, I thought something was lacking. At times, I felt he held on to the ball a little too much. He was very crucial in that fifth goal that they did score. But of course, he's one of those players that are returning to their full fitness and are not yet really much sharp. So he could start on the bench for this particular one, as well as Leandro Trossard. Not so much because he doesn't deserve to start, but maybe in sort of a penalizing kind of feeling. We saw him, he had to carry a few things for his squad mate, having suffered for that red card, which Mikel Arteta, at the end of the day, the way he treats his squad, could pass for an indiscipline. But anyway, he will be playing this game in preparation or in the back of his mind, knowing that he will be playing against PSG in the UEFA Champions League in the midweek. So that will be a concern for him. On the side of Leicester City, still searching for their first victory of the season in the Premier League, but they remain a very stubborn side that you cannot really count off. Jamie Vardy still aging like fine wine. He does score the goals. There's a midfielder there called Steffi Mavividi playing alongside Wilfred Ndidi. I think they're very, very good players in there that Arsenal may want to worry about. Then there's a Jordan Ayew there, formerly at Crystal Palace, who is playing in the number 10 role behind Jamie Vardy. So really, if Arsenal do not exercise their defensive prowess, Leicester is one of those teams that do enjoy scoring the goal and can easily hurt this Arsenal side. The advantage for Arsenal is that in the last 5 meetings against this Leicester City side, they have not lost a single fixture, neither have they drawn. So they have managed to beat up against Leicester in all those last 5 meetings. Overall, there have been 34 meetings between the two sides, Arsenal winning 21 of those, 5 ending in draws, while Leicester has won 8 of those. Now, this is a Leicester side that will be without the services of one of their very, very good players in Patson Daka, the Zambian international there, who is a doubt for this particular fixture through injury. And then, of course, Yannick Vestergaard, who is also another one of their important players, but they will have to contend without those. Now, while Leicester remain a very good side, I do not think this will be the weekend in which they record their first victory of the Premier League this season. That's why I'm going for a 3-1 victory for the Gunners. It does remain still a big challenge for the Gunners to create chances, but against Leicester, a team that may open itself up more as compared to Manchester City or Tottenham or even Aston Villa, is one I think that they can go and find a few more goals than they have scored in recent times. Let's move on to another fixture, but we will stay in London, where Chelsea will be up against an unbeaten Brighton and Hove Albion. Now, Brighton do come into this particular fixture with doubts for one of their star players in João Pedro. He could miss this fixture through injury, and that should be a big concern for Fabian Hassler. Nonetheless, he does have the options to try and replace him, including Ivan Ferguson, Danny Welbeck. The Dutchmen are in there, so very, very capable players there that can beat up against this Chelsea side. They've recorded 2 victories so far in the 5 opening fixtures this season, including beating up against Manchester United by 2-1 and beating up against Everton on the opening weekend by 3-0, while the other subsequent 3 games have all ended in draws. The other one being, I think, a 2-all draw against Nottingham Forest last weekend, a 1-all draw against Arsenal, and a goalless draw against Ipswich Town. On the other side, Chelsea have not lost a game since the opening weekend when they lost to Manchester City by 2-0. In that period, they went on to beat Wolverhampton Wanderers by, I think, 6-2. They did share the spoils with Crystal Palace in a 1-all draw, beat up against Bournemouth by 0-0. That goal scored by Christopher Nkunku off the bench. And last weekend, they did beat up against West Ham United by 3-0. Nicholas Jackson picking up a brace there in his 50th appearance for the club there. And then, of course, Cole Palmer finding himself on the score sheet in that particular game. So Chelsea are starting to gain some bit of momentum. It may be a little too early to say, but they are looking pretty good. Actually, better than some of the teams that I thought or I predicted at the start of the season would finish about them. One of those being Manchester United. So it looks like Enzo Maresca is starting to have a decent picture of what his starting lineup is. Of course, he seems to favor Jordan Sancho in that starting forward 3. Of course, Nicholas Jackson is being trusted ahead of Christopher Nkunku And then, of course, you do have Cole Palmer in that mix there. Noni Madueke is one of the trusted servants so far. Enzo Fernandez did return to this fold. And then you have Moises Caicedo, who will be facing his former bosses. And then in that backline of Wesley Fofana there and Levi Colwill. And then, of course, you do have an inverted Marco Cucurella, who I think has fared well so well so far. Malo Gusto has returned from injury, so he could be fielded. Ben Chilwell, he did feature in that EFL Cup game. So clearly, you do have Robert Sanchez, again a former, Brighton and Hove goalkeeper. So depending on what team or on what squad that Enzo Maresca does choose to trust for this particular fixture, including the likes of Mukalo Mudryk, who are yet to find a place in the starting 11 because they are deemed wanting in terms of their performances. João Felix there, he does have all the tools to beat up against this Brighton side, to condemn them to their first defeat of this season. Fabian Hatzler won the first Premier League Manager of the Month award. That was for the month of August. So clearly he had a wonderful start, although things have, doubled down a little bit. He was given a red card in their last game against Nottingham Forest. Morgan Gibbs-White was given a red card in that particular game, and then there was a bit of a spat on the touchline, and Nuno Espirito Santo, the manager on the opposing side, also did receive a red card for that particular fixture. But anyways, I do think that nonetheless that Fabian Hatzler or this Brighton and Hove Albion side do have the team that can equally condemn Chelsea to a defeat on a good day. You have the Pavis Estupinan, you do have a Kaoru Mitoma in that team. These are all very, very decent players on a good day that can hurt you. We've already mentioned Danny Welbeck, we've already mentioned Ivan Ferguson. So clearly there's a Tariq Lamptey in there. This is a well-coached team so far. They do manage to replace managers really well. We all remember when Graham Potter parted the club and found his way to Chelsea, where he didn't last long. They replaced him with Roberto Di Zerbi, who has since left the club and joined Olympique Marseille, where he's doing really well. I think they managed to beat up against I think Olympique Lyon by 3-2 last weekend. So, and then they've since replaced him with Fabian Hatzler, who has started really well. So this Brighton side, there's a couple of things that they do right. Simon Adingra in there, very, very capable of hurting a team like Chelsea. Then there's a Baleba in there in that midfield, was brought in to replace Moises Caicedo. Things haven't really clicked perfectly well for him, but he is not too far down those performances. So we'll wait to see what this fixture does offer us. But in the last 5 meetings between the two sides, Chelsea have won 2, Brighton have won 2 of those, while the other did end in a draw. But overall, the two sides have met at least 14 times in the Premier League, and Chelsea do have the lion's share of victories from this fixture, those being 8, while Brighton only have 2 to show for it, the other 4 ending in draws. So clearly, it's a game no shy of draws, but a game whose wins for Brighton do come far between places. Nonetheless, whereas I do think they will offer Chelsea a good amount of competition, they'll really test Chelsea's progress so far under this Enzo Maresca era. I do think Chelsea may edge this one by at least 3-1. Behind, with the force of their home supporters there, I think they will cheer them to another victory yet this weekend. And then lastly, our last fixture that we'll be looking at is that will be coming on Super Sunday, when Manchester United host Tottenham Hotspurs. Now, yesterday we did discuss matters Manchester United about their slow start to the season in the aftermath of that 1-1 draw against AFC 20 in the Europa League. Now, while United did draw in the following day, which was Thursday, Tottenham went on to beat up against Qarabağ by 3-0. in the same competition, despite being a man less by as early as the 8th minute when Radu Dragićon was given a red card in that particular fixture. They managed to go on and win. Brennan Johnson on target in that fixture, and then the other was Dominic Solanke on target. I forget the other third goal scorer, but they did have a very, very brilliant performance on the day. Of course, Guillermo Vicario had a very wonderful performance. He did come to the rescue of his side, being given that they were down to 10 men. So it was a very, very wonderful game to watch and a beautiful fixture. Now, Manchester United, things have not yet clicked. The start to this season is no different from what we saw of them at the start of last season. Players like Bruno Fernandes are yet to find their form. Joshua Zirkzee is trying to fit into this new environment of the Premier League. Of course, Manuel Ugarte is being fielded. Christian Eriksen, some did blame him for that goal they conceded against FC20, but I don't think he's really entirely to blame, given the one that FC20 had before Lemars steals that ball away from Christian Eriksen to go and score past Andre Onana. So Tottenham on the other side, they've not had the desired start to the Premier League campaign as well, because they've suffered a couple of defeats in there. I think they've suffered 2 losses. They've won 2 games and drawn 1 game, just as much as Manchester United on the other side, because Manchester United have also have 2 losses, 2 victories, 1 draw. The victories coming up against Southampton and Fulham, losing to Brighton and Hove Albion and Liverpool, while they did draw against Crystal Palace. Tottenham on the other side beat up against Brentford by 3-1 in the last fixture. I think they beat up against by Everton. I think it was by 4-1 around there. And then of course they did lose to Arsenal by 1-0. I don't seem to recall what the other loss for them was. But so that's the kind of space in which the two teams find themselves in. Things have not yet really clicked for them both, but it is looking slightly worse at United as compared to that it is at Spurs. So Spurs, we all know, love to play that expansive football, very open football, which oftentimes leaves them vulnerable to counterattacks. They're very poor at defending set pieces, so one would hope that Manchester United would look to leverage on those weaknesses and catch them on the break, or look to secure those set pieces that could get them some goals on the other end. So in the game on Thursday in the Europa League against Qarabağ, they had a very much changed side in terms of playing setup. You had Yves Bissouma in there, Pape Matsa in that midfield. You had a Ben Davies in that backline, Mickey van de Ven, for some of those players who started alongside Rudy Dragićon, who suffered the red card. Then you had the captain Son Heung-min, Dejan Kulusevski came off the bench. Then you had Brennan Johnson in there for some of that composition. You had the Dominic Solanke. There were a few changes, but anyway, overall, historically, of course, Manchester United has dominated this particular fixture. The two sides have met at least 64 times in league history, as far as the Premier League history is concerned, and Manchester United has won at least 39 of those. Spurs have won 11, while the other 14 have ended in draws. So clearly, it's a fixture that Manchester United do know well how to dominate, dating back into the Sir Alex Ferguson era. For those of you that remember this vividly, it used to be that kind of fixture where, regardless of what the scoreline was, even at halftime, United were destined to win that game. It looked like Harry Redknapp literally washed Alex Ferguson when back in those days. For those of you that do remember some of those memories, when Spurs still had the likes of Ledley King, the times of Robbie Keane, the times of Jamin Jenas, Alan Lennon, and then of course Michael Carrick in that midfield before Manchester United bought him off, Dimitar Babatov. That kind of team back in the days. But anyways, more recently, in the last 5 meetings, United have won at least 2 of the fixtures between the two sides. One was a win for Spurs, and the other 2 being draws. So it's that kind of fixture that is a little hard to predict. But again, I do think United historically hold, or in terms of pedigree, hold the advantage. There's something about United that tends to scare Spurs. The odds had changed during the Mauricio Pochettino bit of era, and I think the short spell of Antonio Conte. But things are, I don't know. It's really hard to call. Last season, Manchester United won one of the fixtures, and I think the other ended in a 2-all draw. So clearly, it's a hard one to call. But given the kind of place where Manchester United find themselves and where Spurs are in this place, a draw, a 2-all draw is a result that would be expected. But then I do feel that Spurs, the way they create chances, the way they attack, I give them a little bit of an advantage. But the small boy in them could disappoint on a day. But against my better judgment, I'm going for Spurs 2-1 win for this one. Do let me know what your predictions are, what your thoughts are on all those fixtures, on all that conversation that we've had, and do let me know what your thoughts are, your comments, your predictions, and everything that you can afford to put down in the comment section. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel so that we can continue to grow and share our content. Otherwise, stay blessed and have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time.